Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another tropical forecast and outlook by Agent Weather Forecast. And in this video, we're going to be doing another update on Invest 90L, which is sitting in possibly now aiming for portions of Florida. Percentages have increased for the next 48 hours and 5 days, and overall, we have a lot to talk about within tracks, possibly peak strength, and just overall, we have a lot to talk about. But before we get the video, I would recommend you guys smash that subscribe button, as well hit that like button and bell icon so you guys can get notified as soon as I post the video. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the tropical forecast. First thing I want to go ahead and get a look here is the 5-day tropical weather outlook by the National Hurricane Center, obviously. So let's go ahead and get see what we have as of the latest advisory at 2 p.m. Eastern, and at this point 2 p.m. Eastern does have this at a 60% for the next 48 hours and a 60% for the next 5 days. So we now have a 60-60, so the same probability for 48 hours, which is showing there is definitely some confidence that this thing can very well become a tropical depression within the next 5 days. And I would not rule out the possibility if we do have a 70-70 or even 80-80 by the 8 p.m. advisory. So we still have those showers and scattered thunderstorms activity remaining disorganized along an area of low pressure, which is basically around 200 miles east of Daytona Beach, Florida. Conditions are going to be marginally favorable for development within the next 48 hours. However, good thing is shear will start to dramatically decrease. However, there still is going to be some dry air, so the best chance for this thing to get acted together is if it goes through Central Florida and goes out into the Gulf of Mexico. But we are looking at Recon 2 flying to the system very, very soon. I actually think they're going to get there very soon, because last time I checked, they were near, I think they were near Apalachicola. So Recon should get there very soon, but ASCAT has already proved that we have 30 knots, which is basically 35 miles an hour. So I do think there is still a very small chance for a tropical storm, but I feel like there's definitely a better chance than yesterday, because considering how little shear we're seeing across the Gulf of Mexico and as well overall the southeast United States. The only problem is right now the dry air is getting into the system and opening up that low pressure. But there's really a good chance this thing gets acted together if it does go into the Gulf of Mexico. Obviously, we have those very, very warm waters, and overall, very nice amount of moisture going in that region, as well very little shear. So I think this thing could definitely have it's definitely a very, very, very good chance to become a tropical depression. And I think there is an increasing probability that it could become a very, very weak, if not short-lived tropical storm. I'm not going to rule out the possibility, and I never have ruled out the possibility, but I think I'm going to give this maybe a 20% chance to become an actual tropical storm, Fred. I'm not going to try to pre-name this, because like I said, it's very, very unlikely. However, there's definitely, the conditions are there, at least for the Gulf of Mexico. And as the Bermuda High continues to go further eastward, those southern easterly winds will push this system into Florida. So that's going to really lead to very good chances that this will end up in the Gulf of Mexico. And it won't be the fastest moving storm. The northeast Gulf of Mexico is pretty darn warm and favorable, so we're going to have to keep a very close eye on it. Let's not go and get a look here at the satellite imagery on Invest 90L. And this thing does look a lot less Invest-like compared to yesterday. This low is a lot more open. There's not really much closed circulation at all. You can kind of see that vorticity, still seeing some type of counterclockwise vorticity and spin within the actual low pressure itself. So let me go ahead and actually highlight that low pressure. So basically the low pressure is really, really open. A lot of that vorticity is kind of towards the south. We kind of have some good amount of scattered tropical thunderstorms, but you can see right here, there's that spiraling cloud cover. You kind of see some few cumulus clouds kind of going around the counterclockwise way around this actual low pressure. You can kind of just see the overall scattered thunderstorms. Actually, in the very first part of the GIF, you can kind of see that very nice counterclockwise spin right there. And this low is basically around this region. I believe maybe towards possibly, we're getting, let's see here, maybe around possibly 77 degrees west, and like 30 degrees north is kind of where we're seeing the actual low pressure itself. This is within really warm waters. I believe this little outline you're seeing here is basically 28 degrees Celsius waters, and then right here I think it's at 28.5 or 29 degrees Celsius waters. So overall, these waters really won't be a problem. We're still seeing some really warm waters within, so that really won't be a problem. However, the one problem is we are seeing some drier kind of coming in from the northeast. Obviously, like I mentioned, the southeast ridge is currently bringing in some dry air and some shear at the moment. The shear isn't going to be the main factor right now. However, the dry air is going to be the main reason why this low pressure is so open. So obviously it is drier because we can look at the relative humidity, but there is a lot of dry air kind of spilling in. Oh, and as this blows kind of far to the northwest of the actual convection, it's really quite open, and it's gonna definitely look quite ugly. However, as it continues to move towards the west, it looks like that dry, or possibly southwest, southwest into portion near central Florida. And there is a little bit more of a northern trend that can go near areas into north central Florida. But overall, we're going to be really watching out for the eastern coast of Florida for a potential landfall. Obviously, it's very unlikely it does turn to the northeast like that. It's just really unlikely based on the Bermuda High itself not having much of an actual impact on it. Bringing it northeast that quickly, because obviously it's not that far west anymore, so it's bringing a lot less of a influence. But right now it's not looking too bad. Good amount of convection overall, so just gonna watch out whether this thing can get its act together overnight. Let's now go and get a look here at the Invest 90 model intensity guidance, and this is looking at the 18Z. So this is actually 18Z. I believe this came out around almost 2 hours ago. So there is a lot of a smaller trend when it comes to the possibility of a tropical storm. Obviously, in yesterday's video, all of them were showing tropical storm. Obviously, it's because it was a very early on guidance, and actually last night, none of them showed tropical storm at all. It was very unlikely, but now there's a little bit bigger of a spike, but overall, it's definitely still a lot less of a trend compared to yesterday. So obviously sitting here at around 30 knots, which is basically 35 miles an hour. So it is basically technically 4 miles an hour from tropical storm status. But obviously for the nationals to round it up to 40, it's got to be 5 additional more miles an hour. However, considering the dry air spilling into it, I don't see this getting up to 40 before Florida landfall. However, like I did say, it's so unlikely, but there's definitely an increasing threat. If this does go into the Gulf of Mexico, if it does go on track, maybe it can become a very brief weak tropical storm in the Gulf of Mexico, but again, still very unlikely. And that's why we have this big spike right here within a few models. There's still a majority, I think maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that are getting this to not touching at all 40 plus miles an hour, but we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 getting this to tropical storm. So it's kind of basically a half and half right now. So it's very dead even. However, the majority that do get this to tropical storm want to have it within the next 48 and 72 hours, and that actually does match up with the Gulf of Mexico time period, because if we look at the model intensity guidance, you can see by around 48 to 72 hours this will be across portions of the Gulf of Mexico or Eastern Gulf of Mexico. But let's now go and get a look here at the 18Z tracks, and obviously compared to yesterday's video, a lot more aiming towards Florida, because it was kind of half and half yesterday with northeast and then going kind of west. So right now this thing is done steering toward the east. Obviously it was steering east or southeastward yesterday. It was basically located around right here yesterday, and now it's all the way down here. And the reason why it went that way is because the Bermuda High was quite far west. It was actually basically near Bermuda itself. So what that does is that those southeasterly winds that kind of come toward the southern portion of the Bermuda High pick up, actually just attract the system. It attracts the system. So since the Bermuda High was that far west, the system was steering towards the west. It was steering towards the east, sorry. Oh, I'm losing my mind. So basically the storm steered east yesterday because the Bermuda High was incredibly close to the general region of vicinity. Obviously it wasn't that darn close, but obviously with the high pressure that strong, it obviously doesn't take much for it to be having an effect. However, since the Bermuda High has kind of pushed a lot further east compared to yesterday in the morning, it has a lot less of an impact, and actually those southern easterly winds are pushing the storm now due westward into portions of Florida, and then eventually it'll take a northeastern track, whether or northeastern turn, whether it's in the Gulf of Mexico or whether it's like this or whether it's like this. At some point, it's going to take a northeasterly turn because of how the trade winds work, and obviously, and still the Bermuda High is going to bring winds that scoop it up at some point, but it's going to be a lot later of a northwest turn than obviously expected, because obviously the Bermuda High would have to be very, very close for this type of track to happen. That is definitely not very likely at all. So the most likely landfall is going to be for central or just overall eastern Florida. We do have a little bit of little bit more of a northern trend towards Jacksonville region. However, I think it's going to mainly make landfall possibly near let's see here. I believe I'm actually not really familiar with my actual like central beach areas, but I think it's going to be obviously West Palm Beach is basically right here. So basically anywhere north of West Palm Beach is where I think we can possibly see overall that landfall and just overall central Florida. I believe, what's that? Let's see here. Daytona Beach, that's it is. It's probably going to make landfall nearly in the region near Daytona Beach is exactly where we're watching out for that landfall. And if that does happen, if that is verified, it could very well go into the Gulf of Mexico with those 30 degrees Celsius waters, very good amount of moisture. That dryer is going to be sticking around off the southeast. So overall, if it does go into the Gulf of Mexico, we'll have a good shot to possibly become a named storm. Let's not go and get a look here at the 12Z GFS and overall 12Z model runs. So here's now a look at the GFS, and there's that large Bermuda High. It kind of has pushed very far east, but we're still seeing those impacts of that very large area of dry air, which you'll be seeing in quite a second. But there's that low pressure right there, that small area of low right there in that area of lower pressure. Let's actually get a look at the actual pressure itself. So let's see here, the pressure. So we're basically be seeing, I believe it's going to be around 1,012 millibars itself, pressure-wise. But yeah, we're definitely seeing some lower pressure within this actual region. That's actually going to be very favorable if it goes into the Gulf of Mexico. Pressure will be a lot lower in that overall region, so that's going to be very favorable towards the actual system itself. But let's now go ahead and go back now into the MSLP. So we're going to be seeing obviously around 1,014 millibars around that general vicinity for the GFS, and then they have it making landfall basically near the Daytona Beach area, but they do not have it really regaining strength or getting any strength at all once it goes back into the Gulf of Mexico. Let's now go ahead and get a look here at what the CMC wants to say. Obviously, I think the CMC is definitely the most reasonable when it comes to the system. They want to have it get to 1,012 millibars. Obviously, there is that Bermuda High. It kind of has pushed a lot further. East compared to yesterday. I believe yesterday the Bermuda High was basically right here, so it had kind of that more I guess effect on it. But now that the Bermuda High is pretty far west, those easterly winds coming from the south will now kind of keep this system now going directly westward into Florida, and then eventually it'll help kind of scoop it up. So that's going to be the effect within that Bermuda High. So it's going to be really watching out if this were to verify. Either like this or possibly like this will be the most likely track. And actually, this kind of reminds me of Sally, because Sally obviously was kind of down here near the Bahamas, and it looked like really nothing at all. I believe it was a tropical depression over Miami, and it really wasn't anything to really watch out for. And then it really strengthened in the Gulf of Mexico. Obviously, the waters weren't much warmer at that time when Sally formed, and obviously Sally did become a pretty intense category 2 hurricane. So obviously, definitely, I'm not saying this is going to be category 2, obviously, but I'm saying it reminds me that Sally had no potential when we first thought about it, and then it became a category 2 near Mobile. So obviously, this has a lot less time. Obviously, if it were down here, we would talk about a different story, but it's all the way up here, and it really won't have much water time. So this could very well happen like with Sally, but this does not become a category 2, but maybe a weak tropical storm, which is just something to watch out for. But CMC wants to have this get to 1,013, and then going to Florida, and they really don't have much as well going on. And then last but not least, look at the icon. Icon's kind of been very similar to the CMC, 1,011 millibars, making landfall near north central Florida, and then it really kind of just dies out. So the model tracks, the global models aren't really following the intensity guidance, 18Z intensity guidance, but they are kind of getting towards the 18Z tracks. So definitely very interesting. Let's now go ahead and get a look here at the actual 10-meter wind forecast for this. So here's a look at the GFS. So there's the actual low pressure itself. You can kind of see a lot of convection kind of staying towards the eastward, and that's actually where we'll be seeing our strongest winds. Looking at right there, basically 33 miles an hour, which is actually pretty accurate if you think about it, because this now got 35 miles an hour. So this is basically only 2 miles an hour off. So it's actually not that far off. And then the GFS wants to get this seriously around maybe actually a little bit of strengthening trend at maybe 32 miles an hour by the next, let's see here, 5 hours or so. As in, again, the next 12 hours, though, this will possibly start getting impacted by shear. You do see a 37 right here, but that is not related toward the actual system itself. It's kind of like more of a different type. It's just not related toward the actual tropical system itself. But it looks like the GFS wants us to kind of just get ripped apart, possibly by that dry air and just completely dying out. Let's see what the 12Z CMC wants to have. They actually want to have this get up to, actually right now they have it at 32, so it's still not that, it's actually not that inaccurate at all. And then they as well kind of have this really weak, and actually I believe the CMC now has it weaker than the GFS, getting up to maybe only 25 miles an hour once it gets towards Florida. So like I just say, the tropical storm is still very, very unlikely. However, I still think that depending on the track, if it does go through Florida into the Gulf of Mexico, a tropical storm is still unlikely, but it's a possibility. It's definitely more likely than yesterday when we were thinking about it. But the waters itself, like I'd say, really warm waters across the northeast Gulf of Mexico, getting spots nearly 30 degrees Celsius near Tampa Bay, and just portions where almost where else they may landfall. So we see almost 31. Oh, actually, we're seeing spots nearly 31 degrees Celsius near portions of the west coast of Florida, and overall we'll be seeing anywhere from 28.5 to 30 widespread across the northeast. So very, very warm water, which is why I'm saying, even though it has if it does go like this, let's say it does go like this, that's very little water time, it's still going to be seeing really enough water to possibly, depending how weak it gets before landfall in Florida, that it can very well become something interesting, maybe 40 miles an hour. However, think about it. It's probably going to be a lot weaker when it actually hits Florida than what it is now. Right now it's 35. It can definitely be a lot weaker, maybe 25 or 30, when it actually hits Florida. So that's going to really you got to take that into consideration. If it does hit Florida at that, maybe let's say 25 miles an hour, and it goes over all Central Florida, it's probably going to come out at 15, 20 miles an hour. Very just, obviously, I don't think it's going to completely alright. You're not going to see 15 to 40 like that in the northeast Gulf of Mexico. But let's say it makes landfall in Central Florida at 30 miles an hour, then it probably gets maybe to 25. Still very unlikely to get up to 15 miles an hour additional. So it has to make landfall at 35 or near there to actually have a chance to become a tropical storm in the northeast Gulf of Mexico, which I still think is quite unlikely. But overall, Gulf Stream pretty warm across this region, 28.5 waters. Let's now go and get a look at the shear. So right now this thing is encountering a good amount of shear from the actual southeast ridge. That's actually associated more of a kind of a trough. You see that trough kind of just dipping like that. So it's kind of more of associated with the trough, with the ridge kind of bringing more shear into the actual mid-Atlantic. But as we now go into the next 12 hours, this shear will dramatically kind of die off a lot. Even by the next 36 hours, we're going to be seeing very, very little amounts of shear across portions of the Gulf, across the southeast coast. And again, this is going to not make landfall possibly for another 24 to maybe even 30 hours. So around 36 hours, we're going to be seeing maybe areas of less than 5 knots. And look at the Gulf of Mexico for 48 hours, 54 hours. That's exactly the time frame we're watching out for this to go to the northeast Gulf of Mexico. It does go there. But look at the overall condition. No matter whether it goes to the northeast, which is very unlikely, or towards the west, which is likely, either way, there's very, very little amount of shear, which is going to be a reason why this thing can very well maybe get its act together after it makes its first landfall. And then, like I said, there's going to be some drier associated with the southeast ridge. It's opening up that system right now, and it's going to likely continue to open it up until actually, if it goes westward, it will get a lot more of a moisture bubble. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.